Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the Chester play of Adam and Eve. So this is a mystery play. The most famous group of mystery plays is the York mystery plays, or the York cycle plays. This was a sort of common thing throughout medieval England. And basically what the mystery plays were was a series of plays that dramatized biblical events. They all basically told the same sets of stories, right? But they did so in localized ways, right? So the Chester plays would be different than the York plays to a certain extent, because the culture of the area around Chester, which is in which is in Western England, right by the Welsh border, is different in some ways than the culture of York, which is more sort of eastern portion of northern England, right? But the basic idea was the same, right? That these series of plays would teach Bible stories to people who basically couldn't read the Bible for themselves. So one of the things that's interesting about the Chester play of Adam and Eve is that it is much more expansive than the York version. And when I say York version, I really should say York versions, because I think the subject matter covered in the Chester play of Adam and Eve would make up 6 of the York plays. So this is a much longer, more developed, more complicated play than what we get with the York mystery plays, the York cycle. And part of the reason that is interesting is because the Chester play of Adam and Eve puts a number of events into dialogue with one another, so that their sort of thematic concerns resonate because we see them together, rather than the way one would in York, where you experience, say, the creation of the world in one play, and then you experience the creation of humanity, of Adam and Eve, then you experience the temptation, the expulsion from paradise, whatever it is. I don't remember the exact breakup, but basically what we get in the Chester play is God's creation of the world. We get the formation of Adam and Eve. We get the serpent tempting Eve, and subsequently Eve tempting Adam. We get their shame, their expulsion from paradise. We get the murder of Cain and Abel, the distribution of, like, Abel, you're going to be a shepherd, basically, and Cain, you're going to be a farmer, basically. And then the murder, right? All this stuff. And then the expulsion of Cain, like the exile of Cain, right? So all of this stuff happens within the one play, whereas in, again, the York cycle, it would be over 6. And so one of the things that means is that we have parallels. So the biggest parallels revolve around this idea of fallen humanity, right? So after Eve is... Well, so actually the first instance of this... it says here, and I'm always on the fence about stage directions in medieval plays and things like this, because most pre-modern plays did not include stage direction, so often these are editorial additions. But in this case, it's slightly hard to tell, because the main stage directions are in parentheses and italics, but then there are bracketed bits within them, and typically the brackets is used to indicate that this is an editorial interpolation. But we have the stage direction. Then Adam and Eve, so God has just created Adam and Eve. He basically pieces out. And it says, "Then Adam and Eve shall stand naked and shall not be ashamed. Then the serpent shall come up out of a hole, and the devil walking shall say." And this is an interesting one, in part because it's a post-biblical interpretation that the serpent in the Garden of Eden that tempts Eve was the devil, right? That's not in the Bible itself. It's not in Genesis. But it's something that people sort of later came to believe, and now it's the sort of common understanding of the story, or a pretty common understanding of the story. But what we get here seems to be the devil, or a demon, because the character is listed as demon, but the stage direction says the devil walking shall say. We get this demon or devil or whatever it is, who comes along, seemingly not as the serpent, but going to possess the serpent in just a little bit. But the point that I really want to make, this demon tells this story of the fall from heaven, right? So what the demon says is, "Out, out, what sorrow is this, that I have lost so much bliss? For once I thought to do amiss, out of heaven I fell. The brightest angel I was ere this, that ever was or yet is, but pride cast me down a whis from heaven straight into hell." So we have the demonic story of the expulsion from heaven. And then we have subsequently Adam and Eve encountering the serpent. Of course, the serpent is possessed by this demon, tempts Eve to eat the fruit. It's all very standard biblical stuff, right? The idea with these plays was not to reinvent the wheel. It was to teach people the stories from the Bible. So this demon in the form of the snake tempts Eve. Eve eats the fruit. She takes the fruit, gives it to Adam, says, "Here, eat this." He does. And they are expelled from the Garden of Eden. So we have those two parallel expulsion stories, right? The fallen angels whose pride went before a fall, and they now exist to do evil in the world. Then we have Adam and Eve who break God's order not to eat the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They come to know good and evil, and God says, "Fuck up, off out of paradise. You're gone." So one strike and you're out policy, right? It'd be the worst baseball umpire ever. But basically he kicks them out, right? And so humanity falls. So we have this parallel of I have sinned and fallen. And then we get the addition of the Cain and Abel story. And this is a third fall and expulsion, right? Because Cain murders his brother Abel, because Cain, rather than sacrificing the best of his grain or whatever it was, the best of his produce, he finds some like shitty wild growing wheat or something along the side of the road, and he's like, "That's good enough. I will sacrifice that." Abel is like, "I've picked the best animal from my flock," and God is like, "I like the best animal from the flock. I don't like the shitty side of the road grass." So Cain is like, "This will never do. I have to murder Abel." God is not thrilled with this. And so God is basically like, "Cain, you're going to fucking go walk around the earth for a while. You gotta leave home. No friends. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. So Cain gets expelled from the place that he and his family are living. So we have this repeated cycle of commit a sin, face the consequences. Now, this is a very medieval way of looking at things, right? And interestingly enough, before I talk about that, but interestingly enough, at the very end, Cain comes to his parents, Adam and Eve, and says, "Hey, I killed Abel." They're both not pleased with that, and he's like, "Now I'm getting exiled by God. And so Eve says, "Well, I wot and know iwis that very vengeance it is, for I to God so did amiss, when I never have liking." And so basically what that means is Eve here takes responsibility for Cain's transgression. She says, because I sinned, I will never have happiness, right? My one son is dead, my other son is exiled, shit's going wrong, right? Everything is bad. I'm doomed to suffer. I suffered in childbirth. We have to work for our food, etc., etc. Everything is crap. And it is interesting that Eve takes on herself that responsibility rather than saying, "Hey, you made a bad choice, dude. You gotta fucking solve this shit. Don't be going around murdering your brother for no good reason." So we've got all of that. But again, this is a very, I think, medieval way of looking at the world, in that so much of medieval theology, Catholic theology, was centered on these sort of ideas of humanity is sinful. Basically, we're all bad. God probably should send us all to hell. But by properly following the rites of the church, you can essentially redeem yourself, right? So you go through the sacraments, etc., etc. You make good confessions. You pay the church its tithes, etc., etc., and then you will be good, right? God will forgive you because Jesus has redeemed us. And in fact, Adam in this play does describe the forthcoming redemption. He basically says, "When I was asleep, so that God could take the rib out of my side to make Eve, I had this vision where I went up to heaven," or whatever it is, and I'm. He doesn't say Jesus or Christ, although that does happen in medieval plays, even biblical plays set before the time of Jesus, right? The next of the Chester plays I'm going to make a video about, be on the lookout for that next Sunday, is the play of Noah's flood. And in that play, there's a number of times where Noah or his wife or whoever it is says, "By Christ," or I think one of Noah's sons says, "By him who you bought," something like that. That's sort of standard medieval phrase to refer to the redemption by Christ. So we have that, right? And Adam in this play, in the play of Adam and Eve, he talks about having had this vision of humanity being redeemed in the future. And of course, the idea emerges at some point in, I think, late antiquity, probably, of Jesus as a second Adam, right? So in Jesus, in his sacrifice, is made right the transgression of Adam and Eve, right? So we have that element. But the other thing that I think is really striking and interesting about the play of Adam and Eve is the opening portion, where God creates the world. Because it's so fucking long. It's 137 lines. And if you don't, if you're not a theater person and you're not used to reading verse plays especially, you may not appreciate just how long that is. But it's so much text to get through. And most of it is basically just I'm thinking light into existence. I'm thinking animals into existence. And so what I find so striking about it, in that 137 lines, there's 4 stage directions. One of which is, so let's see, we got, then going from the place where he was, cometh to the place where he createth Adam. So he walks a little bit along the stage to get to where he's going to make Adam. We have Adam rising, which is not even an action that God does. It's literally just the actor playing Adam stands up. Then the Creator bringeth Adam into paradise before the tree of knowledge and saith, so they both walk a little ways. Then God taketh Adam by the hand and causeth him to lie down and taketh a rib out of his side and saith. So that's the most actual action that we get prescribed for God in this 137 lines. And the problem is, so I started thinking about this as a performer. Often when you don't have action prescribed through something like stage directions, you can nonetheless make a good guess about what you should be doing, right? So often the dialogue will help you sort of fill this out. But here I feel like it doesn't, because God does specifically basically say, I am thinking these things into existence. Now, it's possible that this involved some sort of stage properties, right? So in the editorial introduction for the Broadview Anthology of Medieval Drama, for the play of Noah's Flood, they say the animals that were brought on were probably painted signs or something, like placards, whatever it is, right? So you get we painted 2 sheep or whatever it is, and you take them onto the boat. So it's possible that we have something similar going on here, where, like, when God says, I've created the stars, someone would hold up like a star shape on a stick or something like this, right? When he says, I've created whatever specific things it is, right? Now will I in waters fish bring forth, fowls in the firmament flying, great whales in the sea swimming, all make I with a thought. Beasts, fowls, fruit, stone, and tree, etc., right? But that idea of, like, all these I make with a thought basically means that the text does not give an actor any indication of what you should be doing, right? There's nothing here. Like, if it says, oh, I'm creating light, but I'm doing that just by thinking about it, like, what physical action do you do as an actor in that situation? None. There's nothing that organically makes sense to do at that point. So it's interesting. Like, I would love to see it performed and see how an actor does this very long, quite boring monologue by God. And I say boring. To me, it's quite boring. Because, again, there's not much that's apparently going on. It's not clear that anything is necessarily happening, with very few exceptions. It's not clear that the actor is really doing anything. But the thing is, it functions almost more like a sermon, which, of course, medieval people would have been very used to. And so for that audience, it probably would not be as boring. Or at least they would know how to handle that boringness in a way that many of us today, watching theater and expecting actual activity, would not necessarily find that rewarding.